What do we do when our dogs don't get along? We often bring a new dog home or have multiple dogs, hoping that they will be best friends and curl up in beds together and share a bone together and be a little bit of a Lady and the Tramp scenario. And often that's not the case. So today I'm going to talk about some things you should consider when we're looking at the dogs that don't get along, some tips and tricks to help them get along better, and also I'm going to talk to you about a case study about two of my own dogs and how I helped them from not being able to be in the same room together to being pretty good acquaintances, even if they're not quite best friends. There are three scenarios when we have dogs that don't get along. One is that we have an existing dog or several dogs at home and we bring home a new dog or a new puppy. Secondly, we might have dogs that got along famously forever and then all of a sudden there's a sudden behavior change and they're not getting along. Or thirdly, and we see this very commonly, is that the dogs were getting along okay, and things were a little bit off, but they just progressively got worse until they're at a point now where we have to do something about it. And we're going to talk about each of those scenarios, but they have kind of the same types of solutions and things that we need to think about regardless of which situation you're in. Before you make any kind of training plan, conduct a thorough risk assessment. What is the risk to each of the dogs and what is the risk to any humans or any other animals in the house? And if the risk is great, for example, someone might get hurt or even killed, please don't rely on advice, just generic advice on the internet. Please get an actual trainer or behavior consultant, one that's used positive reinforcement methods and one that is educated and keeps up to date on the latest techniques, and have that person come into your home or work with you virtually rather than relying on generic advice on the internet. Before we make a training plan, sit down with pen and paper, sit down with any humans that are involved with the dogs, and try to outline which scenarios the dogs are fine in and which scenarios the dogs struggle in. So for example, perhaps they struggle if there are bones out or if a visitor comes into the house, if there are squirrels in the backyard, if you're on a walk and they see another dog. There might be specific antecedents that trigger the aggressive responses or the fighting or arguing between the dogs. We want to narrow it down between activities the dogs can do together well and activities where the dogs need to be managed so that we don't have more problems. And practice makes perfect. So the more your dogs fight or the more they squabble over things, the more likely they are going to continue those behaviors. So we need to step in, figure out when the dogs are going to be good and we can relax and just have fun, and when we need to put some management in place. And that management should be put in place to prevent a rehearsal of the fighting or the squabbling. So that might look like one dog is put in a bedroom before visitors come in, or it might mean that bones are only given in crates. It might mean that on hikes where we see other dogs, one of them is kept in a long line. But we need to put management in place to prevent the dogs from having the altercations to begin with. And then once they're going and once we have some new patterns starting, we can start introducing a training plan to figure out, to help the dogs make better choices and feel better about the scenarios that they're struggling with. If your dogs have always gotten along and now they're not, the very first thing you should do is go to see your vet. If there's a sudden health issue, that can create problems where one dog feels vulnerable and now is reacting and acting out aggressively more so than before. And the other flip side of that coin is if one of the dogs is sick, it isn't doing well, it might smell funny or be behaving funny. The other dogs might sense that and attack them more readily than they would have in the past. So check out with your vet. Make sure that they do a thorough check, tell your vet what's going on, rule that out first. So if there are underlying health issues, we don't want to put a training plan on top of that until those health issues are addressed. And with your big list of things that your dogs can do together well, we're going to put that into their lives as much as possible. So every day, get out and do something where the dogs are happy and having fun together. That's built relationship building, and that's going to help long term help your dogs get along even when there's conflict in other areas. So we've got those two lists, one of the areas where they struggle and one area where they are doing great. Take that great, all those great things, and put them into the dog's lives as much as possible, and then we will be able to kind of rely on that background of having fun together later on if things do get a little stressful. If you've brought home a new dog or a new puppy, that can be very hard on the dogs that you already have in the house. So the most important thing for them is to give them their own space. So we call it living in a gated community for a while, especially until those little sharp baby puppy teeth fall out. We want to give the dogs each their own space using X pens and baby gates. Everybody gets lots of goodies on their own spaces. And we mix it up so that today the puppy might be in the X pen and the adult dog might be out, each with a Kong or playtime. Tomorrow it might be vice versa. We're going to mix it up, but get the dogs used to the idea that there's a separator in place and the puppy does not have free access to the adult dogs. That's going to make your adults feel safe. And the same goes if you brought a new dog home that might be kind of an in-your-face kind of guy, or if you bring a new dog home and the dog you already have is an in-your-face kind of dog. We want to put up those barriers to teach them that they can cohabit the house. They can be there together, doing all the things together, but they don't necessarily need to be in each other's spaces. And that one piece is going to prevent a lot of problems. It's going to get them used to hanging out together and not having to interact. Sometimes our dogs don't understand that they have the choice not to interact, especially certain breeds that tend to be a little bit more tenacious or, full on. If you have an aging dog, it's the same idea. We don't need our young dogs wrestling and bouncing over and bumping an old dog that might have arthritic hips or be feeling sore and tired. Make sure that your younger dogs don't have free access to harass your older dog. Make sure they have their own space. Right, Jay? I personally love the breeds with lots of big feelings. So I've had more than my fair share, perhaps, of dogs that don't get along in the same house. Little Jubilee there, when she went through her false pregnancy, she was resource guarding. She needed to protect her puppies. She needed to protect herself, protect her resources for her puppies so that she could be a good mama to her invisible puppies. And that was very hard because all of a sudden my beautiful puppy hated and thought all the other dogs in the house should probably go die. And that was not fun. And it lasted a full about 4 months before she was back to being okay again. It took a long time. So the steps we put in place for her is firstly, lots of boundaries. I had X pens everywhere so that she did not have access to the other dogs, so the dogs didn't have access to her bed where her puppies were, so that she feels safe and also so that they feel safe. Everybody, us and our dogs, have the right to feel safe in their own homes. And if they're not feeling safe, we need to put enough structure and boundaries in place so that they do feel safe, that they feel that they're not going to be attacked or that their puppies aren't going to be attacked by the other dogs. With Jubilee, it was a health issue. So I didn't put a lot of training in place until after she wasn't feeling icky anymore to let her hormones get back under control. Once they were, I had to carefully reintegrate her into my pack. And that was lots of parallel activities. So for instance, I knew that she was great with the other dogs if we were outdoors. This was an in-the-house only issue. So we spent a lot of time out in the yard, a lot of time hiking, a lot of time just doing stuff together outside. And then we'd all come inside in our own special zones, get a Kong or get a Chewy and live that way. Once she was able to be, once we were able to train a little bit more, when she was feeling better, then she would come into the other dog's zones, but on leash only. And for some times there, I did muzzle her as well. Because I wanted to be sure that everyone was safe. So we came in, she was on leash, I had my cookies, and with dog-to-dog issues, we often do what we call a lot of operant behaviors, so we basically keep them busy. So if she looked at another dog, I'd say, sit down, hand touch, look at me, all high rate of reinforcement. I want a high rate of reinforcement for paying attention to me when the other dogs are near her. I want her to feel that I am under control. I've got this. I'm going to put structure in place so that she is safe, and really so that they are safe from her. We moved from that to stationing. I've got a stationing webinar up so that she could learn that she didn't have to be tethered to me. She could be on a spot, on a dog bed, and the other dogs could be on their dog beds, everyone getting cookies, everyone being just fine and dandy. From there, it's, can one dog come off of a station and do some tricks, do some behaviors, do some training while she stayed on her station. This, adding this structure in place so that she didn't feel that she had to take control. It was controlled. It was under my control. I had it all laid out for her. She didn't have to wonder. A lot of issues for dogs in this scenario come up because the dog isn't sure what's going on. There's a lot of uncertainty, and anxiety and uncertainty are a bad mix. So when we have an anxious dog, we want to make sure that they feel safe and that they know what the program is. They know what the plan is, and they know that everything is going to go A, B, C, D so that they can feel safe. And eventually, I just started letting her have a little bit free time around that structure. So she could have some structure, have 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds of free time. I see her stiffen or give any signs that she was uncomfortable, call her back, get some behaviors, put her on a station, put the other dogs on a station, add that structure back in. Everyone doing good? Release. Let them just kind of be dogs for a little bit. Any sign of heightened anxiety, heightened energy, any kind of signs there of behaviors that I didn't like the look of, just interrupt that. Everyone go to a station, everyone do some work, put some more structure in it. And until we did that until the point where she could just be free with everybody. Now, I'm still, if I gave everybody Kongs or bully sticks, I wouldn't then leave the house. They can all have them in the same room. You might have noticed earlier, they all had bully sticks. I'm not worried about that. I wouldn't lock them in the room here, give them all a bully stick, and leave, because I'm not 100% sure that that would go well. So some things I just manage even to this day. But other than that, she's pretty good. She does really well. So I hope that gave you something to think about when you're dealing with conflict in your house. Figure out where your dogs can be successful, figure out where they struggle, separate those activities apart. Lots and lots of the successful ones, manage the unsuccessful ones to prevent the rehearsal of those conflict behaviors. And then we can work on a plan to start integrating the dogs together in those scenarios. If it's a doorway, we're going to put a lot of structure around doorways so that the dogs don't end up in the doorways together with a lot of excitement and uncertainty about what to do. We want to put lots and lots of structure there so that they understand their jobs and they get paid well for those jobs. And we create predictable scenarios for them that excludes conflict, that excludes any fighting. That predictable scenario for them is pretty much the key when we have dogs that fight within the home.